Exactly 5 months after the collapse of the Pakatan Harapan government under the cover of the COVID-19 pandemic, on July 28, 2020, justice was served at Malaysia's High Court with Judge Muhammad Nazlan Muhammad Ghazali finding former Malaysian Premier Najib Razak guilty on all 7 counts of the SRC international trial. Najib has thus been sentenced to 12 years jail and fined 210 million ringgit for charges ranging from abuse of power, criminal breach of trust and amla after a 95-day trial. The 1MDB corruption saga's first guilty verdict has naturally attracted intense international attention for its audacious scale and scope. Today on The Nation, we delve into the more nuanced subtext behind the SRC trial verdict, its implications for PN, UMNO, PAS, PH, snap elections for Malaysia, and perhaps most importantly, whether this means the socio-political landscape becomes further factionalized or stabilizes, and according to which lines. Joining me in the studios today for this essential discussion are Dr. Bridget Welsh, Honorary Research Associate at University of Nottingham's Asia Research Institute and political analyst, together with also Associate Professor Dr. Hamidin bin Abdul Hamid, political analyst with and Research Fellow with Ilham Center. I'm Tamina Kalji, taking you through this next half hour on The Nation. Good afternoon. Lovely to have the both of you back in the studios.
Pleasure.
All right.
Always pleasure to be here.
Exactly, especially during very exciting times like these. Dr. Bridget, may I start with you? Let's not forget, of course, that the money siphoned off was including 42 million ringgit of pensioners' money. And yet we all still witnessed the hordes of Razak supporters bust into the High Court yesterday in the midst of an uptick of COVID-19 nonetheless. What's the disconnect here between the wider public that does support Razak and also the fact that he has been found guilty, finally?
I think one has to make a distinction between supporting Najib Razak and supporting UMNO. Many of the people there are traditional UMNO supporters. They've come out because they believe in the party, they believe in what the party has done in terms of looking out after them. And many of them were bussed in, and they connect Razak and Najib with UMNO. And I think what's going to be interesting to watch as things go ahead is how much that is separated or not. I think we've seen in multiple times in recent history, Najib has been very successful of tying his success and his future to that of the party. We're now at a crossroads to see whether or not this is going to happen again.
I think you've put it pretty perfectly. Now at a crossroads, Dr. Hamidin, what has been the feel, the nerve, when you're going into social media? The conversations have been on fire. This is literally the only thing which is on everybody's lips. And what's the sentiment overridingly?
I think to some extent, to echo what Bridget mentioned just now, it is very much interesting to look how can one, especially for Malaysian, to really distinguish between the issues of personal, Najib, the issues of party, the issues of nations, bangsa, in this context, Malay, that we look in this context. So this is where the interconnectedness of this is always becoming more complex when we are analyzing Malay politics particularly. So if you see, looking at the social media that's come out since yesterday, some of the people were interviewed who were buses to High Court yesterday.
That's right.
Talking about the interests of the nations, the interests of the Malays, the interests of their community, not so much of the Najib Razak per se as an individual. And at the same time, in my point of view, as Bridget mentioned just now, it's very much linked to party, UMNO as a party. I think it's interesting to see how does this, not only, I always look at this, not only threaten their leadership for UMNO people, but also their lifestyle, their life in the ground is being threatened by any political change, any slight political change on the top. It happened in Kuala Lumpur. They do feel the pinch, even in the Cawangan, in the kampung level. So this
Definitely.
is, in my point of view, the connection between what happened in KL court and what happened in Malaysian politics in general, in society and large. But how this going to be unfolded in the future, I think the next couple of days will be very interesting. How UMNO will react as a party and how UMNO leadership will react, in my point of view, towards PN. And you can see the factions within UMNO begin to emerge. I think slowly for the past even 24 hours, some calling for them to move on, some stick to whatever that they have, and especially on leadership, and using the old norms and values of Budi, of remembering what they did of the leaders.
Exactly.
To the
a
party.
lot of what was referred to.
Indeed, I think this is where I think when we see what happened yesterday in the KL court, I think it's very important to understand the socio-cultural relations in analysing Malaysians' politics, particularly the Malay one.
So I think we'll go a little bit deeper into the identity politics behind it. Bridget, I wanted to refer first to one of your tweets that I read through yesterday, where you talked about the fact that as former Prime Minister, after all, Najib Razak has been charged. At the moment, though, it does say that the rule of law has been upheld. However, within 14 days, an appeal can be submitted, and the outcome may be somewhat different. But in the meanwhile, what does this speak for the current state of Malaysia's judiciary? Is there a little lining of hope?
Well, first of all, I would say that the judiciary has gone through quite considerable changes in the last few years. There have been a lot of new appointments that have been made into the judiciary, and we can see the judiciary has made decisions on many different issues, on different perspectives. So there's been, I would say, arguably a considerable more independence in the part of the judiciary. And I think yesterday's long decision, which was almost 4 hours, and then the subsequent things last till the evening, really reflected a sense of the arguments that were presented in law. And I think that in terms of the caliber of the discussions and the arguments, these were on standards of the international global standard. And one has to respect the judge and how he laid out the positions that were there in a very complex case. In a sense, it involved 2,000 documents. It's something that's not accessible to most people, and I think this was done in a very fascinating way. Now, I think, as you look forward, however, I think one has to be careful not to speculate on the issues of the appeals. We also have to look at what happens within the issues of the arguments in this context, how they played out, and of course also not only in these issues of appeals, but also what happens with the potential pardon down the line, which is a much more political thing than the appeals, which have to do with the arguments in the judiciary. And I think that the judiciary has really been standing on its own in many ways. There have been some issues that people raise, and I think those are legitimate concerns, but generally I think yesterday's decision was one that was very, that I think Malaysia should be able to say, hey, we did our job.
Indeed.
Yeah, at least the judiciary did their job in this arena.
I think, I really want to add, as a Malaysian, I think what's the verdict yesterday and the whole process is very much something that we can proud of. Looking at the process, historical experience of Malaysian judiciary before, as Bridget mentioned, I think for the past couple of years we see that changes is happening, and it is, in my opinion, manifest by what happened yesterday.
At least this court was free from political interference.
But does that really give kind of overconfidence on what's going to be next? I still, as a researcher, I put a break on that. Hopefully this is going to be a good sign for us that it is okay for us to have this. It is something that people really appreciate. I think that is something that we can hold on to that.
By and large.
And more generally, that there is this perception that everything is centralized in Malaysia. And I think one of the things that's happened, and I think even during this period of COVID-19, is there's a recognition that the parliament should be separate, that the judiciary is separate, and that there is a reason that there are these checks and balances that are supposed to operate in a system. And I think that there are different perspectives among Malaysians about how they see these issues of checks and balances. And I think one of the reasons why people were watching this court yesterday, not just for the verdict, but also is that they see the court as an extension of the executive, and that is not what happened yesterday. The court did the court and the issues of the rule of law.
Correct. We saw that clear separation, and meanwhile we're also, of course, seeing the issues evolve about the fourth estate as well. Lots of things that lead to a particularly divisive perspective, but from there going deeper into the implications for PN government's party politics, particularly concerning UMNO and PAS due to this trial's outcomes. What feelers have you already seen?
I think yesterday, even today, I think most of us, when we look at the Najib Razak Facebook, is to some extent answered what is happening between UMNO and PAS, especially among the PAS leadership, shows that it's very clear, intact, the muafakat national between PAS and UMNO. That is, in my point of view, the image that want to be portrayed among the PAS leadership, and when they go and visited Najib Razak. And Najib, I think we know that play an important role in merging the two for the past couple of years. So this is, in my point of view, in that part is okay, but very much interesting is not only between PAS and UMNO, but also in PAS and Bersatu in as a part of PN government. I think that is very interesting. I always say that the threat for Muhyiddin Yassin as it is now is not so much from the PH, but from the PN itself. So the dynamic of the decision today, in my point of view, is going to be very interesting to look at, not only between Bersatu and UMNO, but also within UMNO itself. Within UMNO itself, I think will create a lot more situations among leadership in
potential
in
friction.
UMNO.
Speaking of potential
maybe,
friction as well, what was pretty noticeable was that Khairi Jamaluddin was fairly excoriated on social media just for saying, let's think about the party, let's go forth for the future. What about the younger guard of UMNO? How can they have their voices perhaps heard and even maybe rise to be the voice of reason in the face of the older guard still moving behind in support of Razak?
I think we have two things here. First of all, you know, Malay politics is a fascinating subject. And what we see on the surface is not necessarily what is happening behind. So when there's a picture of togetherness, the interpretation I have as a political analyst is that there's problems in that alliance. It's the opposite. And the fact that you have to have a reassurance in this process, in this type of area. And I think the fact is the PAS alliance with UMNO is going to be tested. And it was tested immediately yesterday in terms of the seat allocations in places like Johor and Terengganu and Kedah. And I think that this is a reality, that they have different interests within themselves, and they're going for the same electorate. So this is the other challenge, right? They're actually going for the same electorate. That makes it really difficult among themselves, because they have to also figure out strategically how to go to the other part of the electorate, because they cannot hold power without some sort of strategic alliance. Now to the second part of your question, which has to do with the issue involving younger people. I think Khairi Jamaluddin represents a different type of UMNO politics. He uses social media. He's one of the few who is really more of an engaged social media person.
Rather than just using it as a
He's been pretty
channel.
quiet recently, as he's been in government in this position. But he took a position, which, by the way, reflected the same position he took in the UMNO party elections that was in June 2018. So I think these are not necessarily an extension. And in that party election, 42%, only 42% of the delegates voted for Zahid Hamidi. The others were split between Tuku Razali and Khairi Jamaluddin. So, and Khairi in particular was able to capture the younger members within UMNO. And I think there is a bottleneck of younger generation of leaders who want representation. The younger dynamic is I would argue, the most important political force in this country right now, given the share of younger voters and the fact that they also represent the potential swings that can happen in political life in these very competitive processes. And that's the same thing also within UMNO. And younger leaders are being held up in terms of being able to rise. And they're divided in their loyalties. And I think this is part of what we're going to see and how UMNO begins to evolve. And the fact is, they have a choice. They've had this choice before. They had this choice in the party election in June 2018, and they have this choice again after this verdict. Will they move on past Najib Tun Razak, or will they be waylaid by the past and held back? And I think that the fact that there is discussions about this and people taking positions that are negative or positive. And also keep in mind what I said just now. Those that may be negative may actually be positive.
That's right.
We have to see.
At least the discussions are a lot more open now, right?
Yes.
So we go into a quick commercial break at this juncture, but we'll come right back into the conversation. Stay tuned. Right. Dr. Hamidin, going right back into the discussion, how do you foresee this potential for reform within UMNO unfolding? What would be the two wings? Hardline, the young version? Could there be opportunity for Hishamuddin in there?
I think what the verdict yesterday gave UMNO huge opportunity to relook, reassess and realign and also create a new trajectory, especially for their leadership. I think Bridget mentioned just now, we do expect when we analyse, when we study the UMNO election in June 2018, we do expect something new, but it doesn't happen there. And it's still continue. And in fact, the issues of leadership is, if you look at what's happened now and look at the current tweet by Zaid Amidi, actually, in my point of view, is represent the issues of leadership. With the current situation, most of the seniors people are facing court cases. UMNO face that. Who's going to be, for example, the poster boy of UMNO when it comes to elections? I think that's one big issue. And thus the young can really represent that. And this is where, as you said, the tussle between the young and the old, the hardliners and then the moderates in UMNO is there. And what party and what represent. So far, in my point of view, not many want to challenge and clearly put the flag on that what they want to carry in UMNO. If you look at UMNO in the past 22 months, in my point of view, from 2018, one of the biggest challenges when we look at UMNO is we see UMNO's become no directions. Among especially on UMNO leadership, it's just
a little calcified.
That surprised me. And the young in UMNO, maybe some people say, as a failed to grasp the flag and carry it out. But in my point of view, if we look at the structure of UMNO, we can understand why that is happening at the same time. So to answer your second part of the question, how that, in my point of view, yes, you can see the dynamic is happening. To some extent, Khairi tweet represent that. There is some voice UMNO who want things to move. It is a part of a continuous voice that want to separate of what is issues that baggages by the former leaders and UMNO. I think there is a strong voice, but to what extent that will become mainstream in UMNO, I think something that we have to look forward to that. But at the same time, I think we can see the fraction. I'm not saying the fraction because UMNO is always like that anyway. The concept
they've also always needed a leader who can manage the balancing act.
In my point of view, you can see a couple of names. The VP leader, the second layers, because we know Tomat. Yes, I think is very charismatic in term there, but Tomat don't have the national figures compared to Ismail Sabri or even Mahzir. Khalid is very quiet, and Khalid Nordin as another VP. Facing pro because you don't have seat in the parliament, so is very difficult in that sense. So in that sense, in my point of view, UMNO need to mobilize new faces, especially among the youth, to grab the time.
So speaking about party politics, which of course will lead to the party polls that will be all the way 2023. Until then and now, it will be interesting to see if, let's say, we're taking the Prime Minister of the day, how Muhyiddin Yassin will play the factions against each other. Bridget, your thoughts then, moving into the wider polls question. What is the likelihood of a snap elections being called now in light of the guilty SRC verdict? Are the odds still somewhat as they were day before yesterday, or has the fulcrum shifted?
I thought that if you had asked me whether or not there was going to be snap elections before the verdict, I would say probably not. And now I'm telling you, I think that they're probably not. I mean, is there a possibility? Always, given the fact that at the political elite level, that Muhyiddin Yassin's majority in Parliament, which has not really been formally tested in a vote of confidence, is actually is still very, very small. And we've had a proxy vote for the removal of the previous speaker. My sense is that another vote that would come would be on the COVID-19 relief measures. Yeah. And my perspective is that there will probably be likely that the opposition parties may choose to, some groups of parties may choose to abstain on that vote for the interest of the COVID-19 as opposed to sort of trying to destabilize and to engage in politics, putting COVID-19 concerns over the issues of these particular areas. And as a result, the implication would be that this would come down to the issues of the vote on the budget at the end of the year. All right, and so, you know, as I look to elections, I project that it would be either end of the year or next year, and even maybe depending on what happens at that window, maybe even pushed further down the road. And in a sense, you have to also recognize that Pakatan Harapan is not ready, Pakatan Nasional is not ready, and in some ways, the public is not ready. Although many people in the public and UMNO and others are calling from that for that. But it is a huge expense. You know, this is a period of COVID-19. You know, there are other economic concerns in these issues, and the economy is really struggling in this context. And I think these other problems require attention, and a focus on politicking, as we saw yesterday, with a lot of people coming and crowding, many not wearing masks and so forth, doesn't necessarily engender the kind of the wisest practices in this situation. So I don't rule out a snap polls, but I think that they're probably not likely to be as snap or as snappy.
Not as snappy.
Yeah, me, if I look at from the party's point of view on the issues of snap election, I think it's very much on the formation of PN. To what extent Muhyiddin can secure the formation of PN, I think that will very much determine. As it is, I think what is very much lacking for the Muhyiddin now, there is no coalition, actually, a solid coalitions that
they've always relied on that baseline.
So correct. What they have now very much gentleman agreement between the parties. So I think what Muhyiddin want to have a very secured coalitions, doesn't matter what they want to call it, in terms of that, where he will secure his position, his party position, and UMNO. This is where the negotiation is there, and this is where, as Bridget mentioned just now, the verdicts play its role in there. For UMNO, definitely when they look at one, Najib, and they see other leaders, where they're two, and then where, for example, is the how they want to argue, put forward their interests. This is where yesterday I said that this is not lost all for UMNO. Basically, I think UMNO will use
a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, a lot of strategically to make sure that they gain the most in their negotiate with Muhyiddin. Especially, they know that Muhyiddin is to some extent desperate to secure the establishment of a Perikatan Nasional as a coalition.
So speaking of those who may be ready for the snap polls, let's talk about the youth. But at the same time, the Undi 18 gazetting does hang in the balance. How will this play out in the case of a snap election, be it 2 or 3 months from now, or even, you know, first or second Q of next year? Prof. Bridget.
I think that if elections are going to be held in this window to address this issue of trying to build and develop your own mandate, or potentially lose that mandate, you have a situation where that has to happen before the middle of next year in that context. And because the Undi 18 factor will bring in more uncertainty into the political process.
It's not so much an in-the-bag factor anymore as it was previously thought.
I think when you look, me and my team at Dilham, we are very interested to look at the youth, especially at the Chini, when we try to get that, and hopefully at the SLIM also, because when we analyze the data at SLIM, we notice that Barisan Nasional lost almost all at the PDM level, the youth below 40. So does that will continue under these current circumstances? So this is very interesting to look at, and as we discussed, if we bring in the 18 in that, there will be another dynamic. Looking in the youth sector section in election. But in my point of view, for when we're talking about snap election, it's not only, in my point of view, talking about the parties. I think rightly point out the issues of economic, for example, the big and large, that is always plays role. And people, even though there is a voice that calling for elections, get the real legitimacy, but in my point of view, the larger voice is still people feel fatigue about politics.
Very much
I think because of the COVID and others. I think, and in my point of view, party men also realize that.
Yes, the bread and butter issues has actually become even more important.
And then I think the issues of moratoriums, September's and others, world economics, and I think, like it or not, that's also plays role in deciding on the snap. So I don't foresee the snap will be as soon. As I said, I think as a government, we definitely want to play that, to squeeze as much as advantage that they have.
Certainly, there is going to be a moratorium extension announcement today itself.
Yes, and at the same time, I think for them to secure the Perikatan Nasional, because they must secure something before they go to election. If not, I think there will be more trouble if they don't have a clear coalitions before they go to the elections.
Right. Very quickly before we move off and close, Dr. Bridget, your thoughts about, this is of course the first in a series of trials, but how does it augur towards the political sentiment, towards what will happen as an outcome of even the upcoming ones?
Well, I think people are watching that, right? They're looking to see how people are reacting to this, whether or not there is a sense of sympathy towards Najib and Razak, or whether or not there's a sense of wanting to move on, or whether or not there is actually the sense of elation. And what we're seeing is everything.
Yep.
Right? I mean, we're seeing a whole, and this is the thing to keep it understand, is that, you know, Malaysia is not a simple place. There are, you know, there's anger and happiness. There's sadness and pleasure. And you can see this on social media over what happened on the verdict. And I think that the bottom line is, however, is what this verdict does for Malaysia as a country, not necessarily its politics. And I think one of the things that many Malaysians appreciate is this actually strengthens Malaysia's reputation globally as a country that is moving towards issues of anti-corruption. And this is very important because Malaysia needs as much competitive advantage as it can get in these circumstances. You know, and I think that one of the challenges is that this government has to be conscious that a positive international reputation in areas of journalism, in areas associated with the anti-corruption, really spill over positively for the country.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Hamidin and Dr. Bridget, for joining me here on this essential conversation. And of course, the SRC's trial's guilty verdict points towards Malaysian courts disallowing corporate capture from happening in the country, as with the case of Najib Razak, who did work with Jolo to embezzle the government of Malaysia and hard-earned taxpayers' money. In this case, as we'd mentioned, 42 million ringgit of pensioners' retirement savings. And beyond even the conviction of the former premier and other associated individuals, or the stolen monies being returned, it's essential for the 1MDB saga to be on public record for the manner in which corruption marginalizes the everyday Malaysian, particularly the poor, and for there to be sweeping institutional reforms to adequately address structural issues that allowed for grand corruption to occur at all. This guilty verdict is only the beginning. The prize at the end of this marathon of transparency and accountability is a thriving, resilient Malaysia for all of us, not just the corrupt. I'm Tamina Kausji. Thank you for joining Dr. Bridget, Dr. Hamidin and myself on this episode of The Nation on BERNAMA TV. And as this recording was happening, the moratorium extension as well as the MCO were being announced. We'll see you again next time.